And we're doing this program in conjunction with the Bluegrass Trust for Historic Preservation as part of their deTours program, which has just been a magical thing for our community. And we're delighted to have you all here. Jackson is somewhere out talking to folks in the lawn. But we want to welcome you, of course, to the Rosenwald School here at Cadentown. And I hope you've all picked up, I see some of you have, the brochure that was put together by the University of Kentucky Archaeology Program several years ago, but they've done a lot of wonderful research. The property you will have noticed when you came, Cadentown is part of a 40-acre, the whole area in the hamlet known as Cadentown, 40-acre, what came to be neighborhood, opened up in 1869, and was an opportunity for free that had been enslaved African Americans and some who were free blacks already, who bought land out here, properties ranging from a half an acre to, well, an acre and a half, I should say, on up to 5-acre tracts. And so it's a triangular shaped parcel of land that was platted in 1869. So the land sizes were very key to people's success and desire to be homeowners out here, was because they could be reasonably self-sufficient at that time with that amount of land. You had your garden and your milk cows and all, a few pigs and chickens and all kinds of stuff.
Did they actually do a deed to that land?
Oh, yes. It's a regular land transaction. And the developer, property owner who developed the property, it wasn't a gift. It was a real estate venture. And so the people who took on purchasing those properties, like everyone, worked hard over the years to make their payments and come to full ownership. So it was in the midst of the countryside, as most of you would know, and a lot of the heads of the households, particularly in the late 19th and well into the early 20th century, had work within the horse industry with the farms in the vicinity, which came more and more to be the Madden farm. Madden's, of course, start out, John Madden, with a couple hundred acres and comes to have 2,000 acres. And so this is on the periphery and almost within the edge of some of what, Madden did never own this, but I'm saying its adjacency was very real. And so they were able to have employment if they were in the agrarian and farm and horse farm world, and that was another very important part of Cadentown's success and making it a very good place for those families to live. So the church buys this parcel and builds a church by 1879. It's the building you saw as you came in. It has not served as an active congregation church since the 1970s, but the congregation of this church is still in operation and actively in a building down the street. Not facing Cadentown Lane on this stretch, but just when you turn the corner toward Liberty Road. And so the church itself has had some changes, as you can see, over the years. The whole property is on the National Register of Historic Places, and the whole Cadentown Neighborhood is a local historic district, one of the 16 local historic districts in Lexington County. And it means that the property owners get permits for exterior work on their historic structures within the neighborhood with that designation. And our office works a lot with that, all the pieces that go with it. So the church, as I say, it vacates the historic building up here and has made the move, but they had in the 1920s made the middle of their property, it's a big rectangular piece, as you can see. They had made this area that we're sitting in at the schoolhouse available for a Rosenwald school to be built. And Rosenwald schools, I hope you know something of, but it's a program that Julius Rosenwald, who was with the Sears Corporation, he set up a program that would provide basically a portion of the money for schools in what became a 15 statewide program, predominantly in the South, but also a little bit to the north and to the west. and a very successful program. He dies in the early 1930s, and the program continued on for a few more years, but the heart of it had occurred in the 1920s and somewhat in the early 30s. So the schoolhouse is built. There were a series of designs with the Rosenwald program that had a template of different styles and floor plans for these schools. And so the one you're in is obviously a one-room schoolhouse. The room that is the smaller portion here at the rear was the industrial arts room, so they taught cooking and did scientific experiments and probably, built fake volcanoes and set them on fire or whatever. There was a wood-burning stove. Both the chimney for it is here, and so there was one that heated the smaller room and one here for the school classroom itself. Everybody always asks about the two smaller rooms on the front. They are coat closets, and everybody always wants to say, were those, even did they come to be made into bathrooms? They never did. The plumbing facility was an outhouse, and this was truly rural. Keep that in mind. It was very normal, unfortunately, to be an outhouse in a country like this. So, but Rosenwald's program also, he didn't pay for these schools entirely. Every school built was dependent upon the participation of the community, and a rather substantial amount of participation, demonstrating that commitment to having education available for young, predominantly African-American children. And of course, with your one-room school, everybody was in the single class of ages all together. But some of the schools that were built in some larger communities came to have as many as 5 rooms. And they were somewhat the more, quote, later of Rosenwald's program. And some of those included a residence for the teacher, a freestanding residence on the property. This site never had a house for the teacher, but I suspect the teacher wouldn't be a bit surprised if didn't live somewhere in the neighborhood. So then there's also, so envision 1922, you get the schoolhouse built, and it stays in operation until 1947. And there are a couple of people that we know of, and perhaps more, but not very many more, residents still here in Cadentown who attended this school. And one of them is her husband, I think, attended. Ms. Robinson, are you still
She's
here?
right behind you.
Look! There you are. And what year did your husband attend?
I'm not sure. It was because he went from first grade to, I think, fifth.
So I bet he may have been in the same class as Mr. Seals as far as 47, the last class.
Or right under him.
Could be, yeah, just in terms of possibilities. So yes, 1947 was the last year of the classroom and being taught in this building. And then it lived a kind of quiet life. I think it's not really a community center, but things that you could have like recreational activities, that kind of thing. But it was still held by the church. And then it came to come into private hands in the 20th century, the latter part of the 20th century especially, and went through a series of different ownerships, and then the Urban County government bought it in 2003 and has had it since that time. We got a federal grant in association with a lot of people in the community helping make that all turn out. $300,000 grant, and tied to the fact it's a National Register listed property. Did a very full renovation of the property. There's a great deal of historic fabric of this building still right here, and the work was done obviously very carefully to respect the criteria that needs to be met, but more than that, to just be sure to salvage every part of it that could keep the real stuff in terms of floors and ceilings and wall surfaces and blackboards. Blackboard right behind me is original blackboard, and then the others that are more rich black in color, they haven't had time to fade, are about 15 years old now. So one of the key things, by the way, architecturally, in Rosenwald's buildings, all of them, no matter whether they were one room or more, were very focused on having good light. And so the windows, where they were placed and how the building was oriented was always with an eye. You know, they would have been great in the solar panel business because they thought every site through about good light coming in these big windows. So windows were all gone at the time that we did the renovation in 2006 and 7, and so they are the same details in terms of their mounting system and so forth. And we did take a little liberty and we put steel screens for regular window screens, but they're steel, so they're a little more vandalism resistant. And it's a great product, by the way, if you're interested in doing things with a screened-in window, although so many people don't even know what a window screen is these days. but it's a very successful thing. So, to finish the evolution of it, keep in mind the church, with its ownership continuing well into the 1970s, they also, from the 1870s, had a cemetery that was available to the community, but I think was predominantly, we don't really know much about who all is buried back there, but predominantly probably people affiliated with the church and their families. And you'll see in the booklet, little brochure you've got, that the UK Archaeology Program's work discovered their estimate is that there are 100 to 200 graves buried in that location. And so there's only 3 headstones that are visible. I think the cemetery over the years, there could be some more headstones in underground, you know, that have become covered over by the earth. But there's not been the resources, nor you want an ongoing program going and everything too when you really start to get into trying to restore that cemetery. So it's quietly waiting in kind of a rural, traditional sense of overgrown, but it is there, and it meets the property line on the back. You may or may not know there's a railroad spur that runs right back against the property line of all the properties that face on this side of the street toward Cadentown Lane. And it is owned by Link Belt, and Link Belt has off and on been very supportive of the idea of making that railway bed. It's, as I say, it's a spur for their company. It's no longer used, as you could imagine. So they have been expressed a lot of interest in seeing if it could be put to use for more community participatory things and perhaps get hooked into the Rails to Trails program and take advantage of the proximity of the Brighton Trail, which is slowly and surely coming along out here. So that's the terminus of this rectangle. I will mention, Ms. Robinson was reminding me, but the community well, their only water source was the well. And it's, if you go out the front door of the schoolhouse and past the church, it's right across the road over there in where the Caden Lane makes the big turn. And so it's there on the corner. And we were talking about that we might need to figure out some things to help it out in terms of things for the history. Anybody have questions?
Yeah, I have a question. This is great as far as history goes, but what's the future of this building?
The future is not yet determined, but much being thought about. It is going to be something that serves the community in some manner, and possibly relates to the Rails to Trails system, and the accessibility is made possible for that. Museum thoughts, community activities kind of thoughts. So you need to stay tuned.
I have a question. Who determines that?
I'm sorry?
Who determines what happens to this building?
Well, it's owned by the city government, so it'll be determined by the city administration and council members. There'll be a lot of input about it, probably.
Question over there.
I have a question about the school. Did the church get involved in the school, and who provided the teacher, who paid for the teacher? Did Rosenwald's grants pay anything for teachers?
You know, I've not gotten into that level of research with Rosenwald schools. We're predominantly focused on trying to keep buildings in good form. and get their history broadly. But I'm sure there are people who have studied it and have the answer to that. Does anybody in the room know the answer to that? There's a very good biography of Mr. Rosenwald. You might find that very interesting.
I was interested in this particular one, since the church owned it. I wonder if they influenced the school and controlled the school and provided the teacher, that sort of thing.
I doubt they controlled who the teacher was, because it would have been also part of the Fayette County Public School. It wasn't a private school, it was a county school.
Even from 1920.
Yes, yes. And as a matter of fact, some member of our family in my mother's side was the lady, what are you when you're the head of the school system? She was superintendent. She was Mrs. Nanny Faulkner. She was the superintendent. There are these pictures of her. I commented this to somebody the other day. But she visited all the girls' schools, and I'm only sorry she died well before I could have known her. But it would have been following under that umbrella. But as far as the answers to did it get financial assistance, or did it get steerage toward recommendations on teachers, I just don't have the legitimate answer to that. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah, Betty Nixon.
Thank you. Was Booker T. Washington also involved
Yes.
in this one?
Yeah,
I know
he-
he was involved in the program.
No, he wasn't.
He was not involved in this school, but he was involved in inspiring
Okay.
Rosenwald.
Yeah,
But
that's
he's
it.
not affiliated specifically. I don't think he's affiliated maybe
To
specifically.
be
in it.
more accurate, he died in 1915.
Okay.
The school was built in 1923, cooperatively with the city, providing money and the state. And the reason I'm talking with authority is I went to school here in 1946 to 1949-50. With a twin brother. I had an older brother and an older sister who went here as well. But I want to say something, if you didn't, Betty, she and I know each other. The hard work that was done to make sure that $300,000 was obtained from, and I hope you touch this, obtained from the Transportation Department through the National Transportation and the local Transportation Department to buy this property and renovate these two buildings. $300,000 now, noted in some sources that it's talking about 130. But my wife and I and the members of the neighborhood association were working on $300,000. Now, if it didn't come to the Urban County government, somebody tricked somebody. And I'm talking straight. I used to go to New York. But it is very important that we have the truth. For example, in one of the notes you have, they say the school was closed in 47. No. It was, I was the last graduating class member in 1946. I didn't graduate in 1947. And we didn't graduate. We just got a full